The first night, Elena Marlowe had not planned to stop. The road stretched endlessly before her, a ribbon of dust winding between fields that seemed to whisper of a life she no longer recognized. Her baby, Sophie, whimpered in her arms, restless from hours of travel. The sun had already dipped low, bleeding crimson across the horizon, and the thought of another night spent in motion made Elena's heart ache. She needed shelter, if only for a few hours. When the inn appeared, a modest building with lantern light spilling through its windows, it felt less like coincidence and more like rescue. She pushed the door open with one hand, balancing Sophie against her shoulder. The air inside carried warmth, wood smoke, and the faint scent of bread. Behind the counter stood Daniel Hayes, a man who looked as though solitude had shaped him. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Weariness in her posture, the baby's soft cries, the guarded determination in her eyes. It was enough to stir his quiet compassion. "You look like you've come a long way," he said gently. Elena hesitated. Pride warred with exhaustion. "We just need a place for the night. Nothing more." He nodded, offering no questions that might drive her away. "You'll have it. The room's yours, no charge." The words landed heavily. She had expected indifference or negotiation, not kindness so freely given. Still, she accepted, whispering a thank you as he guided her upstairs. The room was simple: a bed, a chair, a window that opened to the sound of crickets. Elena laid Sophie down, watching her daughter's small chest rise and fall as sleep claimed her. Relief spread through her, tinged with guilt. Relief at safety. Guilt at feeling safer here than she had in her own home. Downstairs, Daniel prepared a small tray of food. When he knocked softly at her door, she opened it, uncertain. "For you," he said. "You've eaten today, haven't you?" She hadn't, not really. Accepting the tray, Elena felt the strangeness of being cared for without condition. As she ate, Daniel remained outside the threshold, as though respecting invisible boundaries. Conversation came sparingly, words exchanged through the half-open door. He told her about the inn, about the rhythm of quiet days filled with travelers who rarely stayed long. She told him little, only that her journey had been long and her destination uncertain. He didn't press for details. His restraint, more than anything, unsettled her. She was used to questions, demands, suspicions. Silence felt alien and oddly comforting. Later, when Sophie stirred with a cry, Daniel appeared again, offering warm water. "I'll let you rest," he murmured afterward, retreating downstairs. Alone once more, Elena sat in the dim light, her thoughts turning inevitably to Marcus, her husband, though the word felt hollow. He was a man of grand gestures in public and cutting silence in private, a man whose loyalty belonged elsewhere, even while she bore his name. She had endured his betrayals, excusing them as fleeting lapses, but Sophie's arrival had changed everything. She could no longer pretend indifference. She could no longer stay. The baby sighed in sleep. Elena brushed a hand over her daughter's soft hair and whispered, "Just one night. That's all." Yet beneath the words, an unease settled in. It was not Daniel's presence that unsettled her, but her own reaction to it. She had accepted his kindness too easily. She had lingered too long at the sound of his voice. The lantern burned low. Outside, the fields hushed into darkness, the world holding its breath. Elena lay awake, her mind caught between fear of the road ahead and the unexpected comfort of the present. Downstairs, Daniel sat alone in the quiet inn, staring into the fire. He had given her space, as he always did with travelers. And yet, tonight felt different. The woman upstairs carried a sorrow that spoke to his own. He told himself she would be gone come morning. That was the way of things. But both of them, in their separate solitude, felt the same silent thought taking root. One night might not be enough. The second night, morning arrived with a softness Elena had not expected. The inn's walls held back the clamor of the outside world, giving her and Sophie a rare pocket of peace. For the first time in weeks, she woke without dread pressing against her chest. Sophie's laughter, light and unburdened, filled the room as the baby grasped at the slanting beams of sunlight. Elena had meant to leave. She reminded herself of that as she folded Sophie's blanket, as she packed the small satchel with trembling hands. But when she descended the stairs, Daniel stood ready with bread and tea set upon the counter, as though he had anticipated her hesitation. "You look rested," he said, his tone simple, without intrusion. She gave a small nod. "Better than I thought possible." Sophie reached toward him, babbling. Daniel smiled faintly, holding back, unsure if he was welcome. Elena surprised herself by letting him hold the child. Sophie's tiny hands grasped his shirt, as if they had known him far longer than a single night. The sight stirred something inside Elena that she quickly pushed aside. "Stay another night," Daniel said gently. "The road isn't kind, and she could use the rest." It was a reasonable suggestion, practical even. Yet beneath it, Elena heard something more, a quiet desire that unsettled her. She should have refused. She should have taken her daughter and left before the lines blurred any further. Instead, she found herself agreeing. The hours that followed slipped into a rhythm foreign to her, but painfully sweet. Daniel repaired a chair in the corner of the inn, while Elena mended Sophie's clothes by the fire. They exchanged few words, but silence between them did not weigh heavily. It carried the ease of two people unburdened by the need to perform. When evening came, Daniel cooked a simple meal. He placed Sophie's basket beside them, where the baby slept in the glow of lamplight. Elena watched him move with quiet efficiency, and for the first time in years, she felt the intimacy of being cared for, not as an obligation, but as a choice. Over dinner, their conversation deepened. Elena spoke cautiously at first, testing the air, but soon her truths slipped free. She told him of Marcus, not in detail, but in fragments. A man who had promised love, yet built a life of absence. A husband who returned with perfume not her own lingering on his clothes. A partner who saw her silence as compliance. Daniel listened, never interrupting, never asking for more than she offered. When she faltered, he simply poured more tea, his presence steady. "It isn't weakness to leave," he said at last. "Sometimes it's the only strength that matters." The words struck her with unexpected force. She had carried shame for walking away, guilt for dragging Sophie across unfamiliar roads. Yet here was a man who saw her choice not as failure, but as courage. Tears pricked her eyes, and she turned away quickly, unwilling to reveal too much. Outside, a storm gathered. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rolling across the fields. Sophie stirred in her basket, and Elena instinctively reached for her, but Daniel was already there, soothing the child with gentle hands. He rocked her, humming softly, and Sophie settled almost instantly. Elena watched, her heart tight. The simplicity of the moment, her child comforted, herself unburdened, felt like a betrayal. Not to Marcus, for he had forfeited her trust long ago, but to the fragile boundaries she had sworn to protect. She told herself this was only gratitude, nothing more. Yet gratitude had never burned so fiercely. Later, when Sophie slept again, Elena lingered by the fire while Daniel tended to the embers. The storm outside raged, but inside the inn, quiet reigned. Their eyes met across the small space, and for a long moment, neither looked away. Elena's breath caught. She wanted to thank him, to put into words the weight of his kindness. Instead, silence stretched between them, charged with something neither dared name. She broke it at last. "Tomorrow we'll go." Daniel nodded, though the flicker in his eyes betrayed disappointment. "As you wish." But Elena knew even as she spoke the words that she would falter again. The road was harsh, Sophie was fragile, and her own heart was not yet ready to walk away from the strange comfort she had found here. As the storm softened into drizzle, she lay awake upstairs, listening to the quiet creak of the inn below. She told herself it was only one more night, just one more. Yet deep within her, a truth stirred. This was no longer about shelter. This was about something far more dangerous. The rediscovery of herself in the presence of a man who had done nothing more than see her. The line crossed. The rain had left the world washed clean. By morning, Sunlight returned, glistening on the fields beyond the inn. Elena stood at the window. Sophie nestled against her, and told herself she would leave today. She repeated it like a vow. The longer she stayed, the more fragile her resolve became. But downstairs, the scent of fresh bread greeted her, and Daniel's quiet voice carried warmth she could not turn from. Sophie reached for him the moment they entered the room, as if she, too, had grown used to his presence. Elena tried to ignore the pang in her chest when she placed the baby in his arms. "Another night won't hurt," Daniel said softly. He wasn't pressing her, but the invitation lingered between them, undeniable. Elena opened her mouth to refuse, yet the words never formed. Something inside her, tired of loneliness, hungry for kindness, betrayed her intention. She stayed. The hours of that day blurred with the intimacy of ordinary life. Daniel showed Sophie how to stack wooden blocks, his laughter echoing each time she toppled them over. Elena mended a torn hem, her hands steady, but her gaze kept drifting to the man who had so effortlessly stepped into spaces she had believed closed forever. That evening, after Sophie drifted into sleep, they lingered by the fire again. The silence between them was no longer companionable. It was charged, every unspoken thought pressing closer. Daniel broke it first. "You deserve more than running, more than what he gave you." Elena's breath caught. "And what would that be?" He hesitated, then answered with a truth too simple to resist. "To be wanted, not tolerated." The words pierced her. Marcus had never spoken them, never even hinted at them. She had been useful, present, convenient, never cherished. And here sat a man who saw her, not as a burdened mother or a shadow of herself, but as someone worthy of desire. Her resolve trembled. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "I do." His eyes held hers, steady. "I know I shouldn't, but I want you to stay. Not for Sophie, not for safety. For you." The air thickened with the weight of it. Elena's pulse quickened, torn between the anchor of duty and the pull of longing. She rose abruptly, intending to retreat, but Daniel reached for her hand, not forcefully, but with a gentleness that unraveled her defenses. The touch was enough. Every memory of neglect, every night of silence beside Marcus, every ache she had buried, rose and broke inside her. She leaned forward, and their lips met. The kiss was hesitant at first, as though both feared the world might shatter. Then it deepened, urgency replacing restraint. Elena's hands trembled as they clutched at him, torn between resistance and surrender. When they finally parted, her breath came uneven. "This is wrong." "Yes," Daniel murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "But it feels like the first right thing in a long time." The fire crackled, throwing shadows across the walls. Outside, the fields stretched silent, indifferent to their trespass. Elena knew she could still step back, still gather Sophie and vanish into the night. But she didn't. She stayed. Later, as Sophie slept unaware in her basket, Elena and Daniel crossed the threshold fully, their bodies echoing the truth their hearts had already confessed. For the first time in years, she felt more than survival. She felt alive. Afterward, silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. Daniel touched her hair gently, as if memorizing the moment. Elena lay awake, guilt and solace entwined. She had betrayed Marcus, yes, but hadn't he betrayed her first? She had stepped across a line she once thought immovable, and yet it felt less like destruction and more like reclamation. Still, unease stirred within her. Choices carried consequences. When morning came, she would not be the same woman who had arrived seeking shelter. Something had shifted, irrevocable. As dawn crept over the horizon, Elena whispered to herself, "Just one more night." But deep down, she knew the truth. One more would never be enough. The road ahead, the morning after their surrender, was quiet, too quiet. Elena woke to Sophie's soft stirring and the faint smell of smoke from the kitchen below. For a fleeting moment, she let herself believe in the illusion, that this inn was her home, that Daniel was not a stranger, that the life she carried was untouched by betrayal. But reality pressed in as Sophie's tiny fingers clutched her dress. Elena could not escape the truth. What had happened was more than a night of weakness. It was a choice, and choices had weight. When she descended the stairs, Daniel was waiting with breakfast prepared. His eyes softened when they met hers, but she saw something deeper now. Hope, fragile and dangerous. "You could stay," he said quietly. Not a demand, not even a plea. Just an opening, an invitation. Elena's heart lurched. For a moment, she imagined it. Days filled with Sophie's laughter echoing in these walls. Nights warmed by Daniel's presence instead of silence. A life built on kindness instead of compromise. But shadows of Marcus intruded. She remembered his dismissive glances, his broken promises, the suffocating weight of vows that had long since lost meaning. Yet he was still her husband, Sophie's father, and the world beyond this, and would never see what she had endured, only what she had done. "Daniel," her voice wavered. "If I stay, it isn't just me. It's her too. And I can't give her a life shaped by scandal, by whispers of what her mother did." He set the tray down slowly. "You think what we shared was scandal. I think it was truth." The words struck her, and she wanted desperately to believe them. Yet the burden of her choices pressed heavier. For much of the day, she lingered, torn between roads. She watched Daniel carry Sophie, his patience evident in every gesture. She watched Sophie's smile bloom in his arms, as if recognizing in him something Elena herself had longed for. It broke her heart to know she could not give her daughter this stability, not without burning the bridges behind her. When evening came, Elena made her decision. She packed Sophie's clothes with steady hands, though her chest ached with every fold. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You're leaving," he said, not as a question. She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I have to." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they could not say. At last, Daniel crossed the room and placed a small wooden toy into Sophie's bag. So, she remembered she was safe here. His hand lingered on the fabric for a moment, then fell away. Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, to promise she would return, but she knew promises built on longing were fragile things. Instead, she whispered, "You gave us more than shelter. You gave us a home, even if only for a little while." At dawn, she stepped onto the road once more. Sophie rested against her shoulder, already half asleep, unaware of the weight her mother carried. The inn stood quiet behind them, lantern extinguished, windows blank. With every step, Elena felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having remembered she was capable of love, heavier for leaving it behind. She had crossed a forbidden line, but in doing so, she had reclaimed a piece of herself Marcus had long stolen. The road stretched ahead, uncertain as ever. Yet within her chest, amid the guilt and grief, a small ember burned. Hope, fragile but alive. She did not know where it would lead, only that she would walk forward with Sophie in her arms and the memory of Daniel's kindness etched into her soul. She whispered to her daughter, so softly the wind nearly carried the words away, "One day, you'll understand." Sometimes the right choice and the hard choice are the same. Behind her, Daniel stood at the inn's doorway, watching until the curve of the road swallowed her from sight. He did not call out, did not chase her. He only pressed a hand against the doorframe, holding himself steady against the quiet ache of letting go. And though the night closed around him, he held onto one truth. Some encounters, no matter how brief, leave marks that time cannot erase.